that the world can proclaim LGBTQ. They proclaim Pride Month and the NBA. They show it to the world to celebrate unrighteousness. So how is it that one can't speak righteousness? God did not make a man to be with a man. God made a man for the purpose of procreation. He made things good. He made the trees. He made the sun, the grass. Man, this man is crazy.
Jaden Ivey, born February 13th, 2002. About a month ago, we sat right here and talked about Jaden Ivey for the Chapter 1 series. At the time, he was a young player dealing with the mental weight of his body not feeling like his own anymore. We talked about the grieving process of a top 5 pick losing his elite speed to a gruesome fibular injury and knee surgeries. But even then, there was a sense of hope. He was still just 24 years old, still on an NBA roster, and he had just been traded to a Chicago Bulls team that seemed willing to give him the space to find himself again. It was only the beginning of his story, a chance to recalibrate and rewrite the script. But today, Chapter 2 has taken a turn as sudden as it's confusing. As of yesterday, March 30th, 2026, the Chicago Bulls have officially waived Jaden Ivey. They didn't do it because of his knee, and they didn't do it because he lacked talent. They did it for conduct detrimental to the team. In a matter of days, Ivey went from a rehab assignment to a total organizational fallout, fueled by a series of intense social media rants that took aim at the very league he was supposed to be a star in. We've covered players whose growths were stunted by things they couldn't control, but Jaden Ivey's career just hit a wall, one that he built himself. What happened? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know who I should do next. To understand how Jaden Ivey ended up on a commercial flight defending his career to a flight attendant, you have to look at the slow-motion car crash that was his 2025. It started on New Year's Day when a broken fibula ended his sophomore season. That injury didn't just break a bone, it broke his momentum. When he finally returned for the 25-26 season, the explosive track star speed that made him the number 5 pick was gone. He looked hesitant, heavy, and for the first time in his life, expendable. The Detroit Pistons, once fully invested in him as Cade Cunningham's partner, quickly moved on. By February 2026, they shipped him to Chicago in a 3-team trade that felt like a buy low flyer for the Bulls. But the change of scenery only deepened the darkness. Ivey appeared in just 4 games for the Chicago Bulls before his knee flared up again, leading to the team shutting him down for the season on March 26. That shutdown was a tipping point. With no basketball to distract him, the frustration of possibly being a bust, and the physical limitations of his body seemingly sent him into a spiral of depression. He began seeking answers in places the NBA front offices aren't comfortable with, trading his playbook for a camera and a platform. He wasn't just rehabbing his knee anymore, he was undergoing a radical internal shift, one that would eventually lead to the public unraveling that ended his time in the league just 4 days later. Stunt number 1, the identity crisis. When we last checked in on Jaden Ivey, he was a young man in the middle of a profound grieving process. He had lost the one thing that defined his entire existence, his elite, world-class speed and athleticism, and he was desperately searching for a way to fill that psychological void. But as the physical rehab for his knee stalled and the burst failed to return, his internal search for meaning accelerated into a territory the NBA was never prepared to navigate. Ivey didn't just find religion as a source of comfort, he retreated into a radicalized, exclusionary version of it as a shield against a reality he could no longer control. In doing so, he began unearthing a plethora of Pandora's boxes that have made him functionally unemployable in today's professional landscape. In a series of recent, emotionally raw public admissions, Ivey revealed a history of deep-seated personal trauma, specifically stating that he was SA'd as a child. While this was a staggering moment of human vulnerability, the cold, calculated machinery of the NBA front offices viewed it through a different lens: liability. This revelation changed the mathematical equation for the Chicago Bulls and the league office instantly. When a player begins publicly unearthing trauma of that magnitude while simultaneously labeling the league's corporate partners and marketing initiatives as unrighteous, they aren't just a preachy teammate anymore, they are a legal and nuclear winter waiting to happen. From the perspective of a billion-dollar organization, the fare is simple. What would he say next? If Ivey continues down this path of public truth-telling and starts naming specific names or identifying the institutions involved in his past, it opens a door that the NBA wants to keep bolted shut. The Bulls and even his former team in Detroit could potentially be dragged into massive multi-million-dollar lawsuits. They could be accused of failing to protect their player, negligence in their oversight, or failing to provide adequate mental health support for a player they knew was spiraling. By waiving him for conduct detrimental to the team, the Bulls essentially cut the cord before the story could get any more specific. They weren't just moving on from a struggling guard, they were insulating themselves from a potential catastrophe. For Ivey, his journey of finding himself led to a truth that was simply too heavy for the league to carry, turning his spiritual recovery into the very thing that ended his professional career. Stunt number 2, the Unrighteous Ultimatum. If the first stunt was about Jaden Ivey's internal search for identity, the second stunt was about his external declaration of war against the league's corporate infrastructure. In the NBA, there's a silent agreement between players and the front offices. You're allowed to have your convictions, provided those convictions don't interfere with the product's marketability. On March 30th, 2026, Ivey didn't just break that agreement, he pulverized it. In a series of live stream rants that lasted nearly an hour, he took direct aim at the NBA's promotion of Pride Month, labeling the league's inclusivity initiatives as a celebration of unrighteousness. He wasn't just expressing a religious preference in a locker room, he was publicly calling the NBA's marketing strategy, and by extension, its fans and employees, inherently evil. This created an immediate, non-negotiable ultimatum for the Chicago Bulls. Billy Donovan and the Bulls' front office are responsible for a global brand that prides itself on diversity, and Ivey's comments were a direct violation of the professional standard required to collect an NBA paycheck. When Ivey asked on a follow-up stream, how is it conduct detrimental to the team, he revealed a total lack of understanding regarding the business of basketball. In a professional setting, detrimental conduct isn't just about getting into a fight or missing practice, it's about becoming a liability to the organization's values. By attacking the very billboards and slogans the league uses to sell tickets, Ivey effectively told the Bulls that his personal mission was far more important than their business model. For the Bulls, the decision to waive him wasn't a debate about theology, it was a simple HR calculation. You cannot have a player on your roster who views the league's foundational marketing as a moral failure. It creates an untenable environment for teammates, staff, and partners who fall under the umbrellas Ivey was attacking. Ivey's insistence that he was doing his job by rehabbing his knee ignored the reality that part of an NBA player's job is representing the shield. By choosing to use his platform to categorize the league's inclusive culture as wicked, he forced the Bulls to choose between a struggling, injured guard and their own institutional integrity. They chose the latter, signaling to the rest of the league that Jaden Ivey was no longer just a player with a sore knee, he was a player with a professional ultimatum that no team is willing to sign off on. Stunt number 3, the airplane paradox. The final stunt in the collapse of Jaden Ivey's career is perhaps the most surreal metaphor to his entire journey. On March 31st, 2026, just hours after being officially waived by the Bulls, Ivey went live on Instagram one last time. But he wasn't in a gym or a press conference, he was sitting in the middle seat of a commercial flight. In a moment that felt like a total detachment from the professional world he once occupied, Ivey spent the live stream telling his followers that the championship rings of Michael Jordan and LeBron James won't matter on Judgment Day. It was a staggering declaration for a man whose entire livelihood was built on the pursuit of those very same accolades. This is the airplane paradox. While Ivey was busy broadcasting his internal truth to the world, he was physically being asked by flight attendants to turn off his device because it was interfering with the plane's communication systems. The imagery was perfect. Jaden Ivey was so consumed by his own broadcast that he didn't realize he was grounding the very vehicle intended to take him to his next destination. He insisted during the stream that he didn't get himself waived and that he was simply doing his job by rehabbing his knee, but his actions told a different story. He had become so focused on his spiritual elevation that he completely lost the signal for how to exist as a professional athlete. By dismissing the legacies of the greatest players in history while currently unemployed, Ivey signaled to the other 29 NBA teams that he no longer valued the currency of the league. If winning doesn't matter and the league's marketing is unrighteous, there's no remaining incentive for a team to take on the baggage of a 24-year-old with a lingering knee injury. The airplane incident wasn't just a quirky social media moment, it was ironically the closing of the door. It showed a player who had replaced his competitive drive with a martyr complex, essentially choosing to be a messenger over being a teammate. At an age where most stars are entering their prime, Ivey chose a path that made him a ghost in the system, leaving the NBA behind before he ever truly had a chance to conquer it. Looking at the wreckage of Jaden Ivey's career, it's easy to focus on the points per game or his lost lateral quickness, but the reality is that Ivey's growth wasn't stunted by a box score. It was derailed by the total collapse of a professional infrastructure that once supported him. He transitioned from a Chapter 1 story about physical recovery to a cautionary tale about the high cost of a personal crusade. When a player stops seeing the league as an opportunity and starts seeing it as an adversary, the ending is almost always the same. Ivey sought a version of himself that didn't require the NBA's approval, and in the process he lost the platform that gave his voice weight. Whether this is the final page or just a very dark intermission depends on if he can reconcile the man he's becoming with the player he used to be. Jaden Ivey had the chance of a lifetime during his time in the NBA, still on just his first chapter in the league. But for these reasons, that opportunity may be at a complete loss. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.